The Romans hated the ancient Britons. They thought they were weird, bow-legged, and didn't know when they were conquered. Hello, my name is Hadley and I'm an archaeologist. In this video, I'm going to show you ancient texts written by Romans about how much they despised the Britons. The Romans called this island here Britannia, and that soon became the name of the province when the Roman army conquered the southern part of it. The conquest reached somewhat of an equilibrium around this part of modern-day England and Scotland, and this is where the Roman lines of fortifications were clustered. This is a letter written about 1900 years ago by a Roman soldier. The letter itself was found at Vindolanda fort along what would become Hadrian's Wall 2 decades later. Even in this period, the soldiers who garrisoned these border forts would have come across the inhabitants of Free Britannia more than most people in the Roman province, and let's just say many didn't like them. The letter is a scouting report because the Roman army would send out scouts to try and determine what the British soldiers were up to, what kind of strength they had, that kind of thing. Here's what it says translated into English. The Britons are unprotected by armour. There are many cavalry, but they don't use swords, nor do the Brittunculi mount in order to throw their javelins. That word Brittunculi there at one point stumped a lot of scholars. Many translated it as Little Britons or Wretched Britons, but actually more recent scholarship has suggested that the term is best translated as effing Little Britons, filling the expletive there because I'm not going to say it in this video. I do find this quite funny though. The idea of these non-British born Roman soldiers talking about these effing Little Britons throwing javelins without even being on the backs of their horses and then just galloping away, like just a hilarious annoyance that these soldiers must have dealt with every single day. Before the Romans annexed the southeast part of Britain by about AD 50, Julius Caesar led 2 expeditions against the Britons. He claimed that the Britons were aiding the Gauls whilst he was busy conquering them, but they probably were other factors at play. You see, Britannia occupied this semi-mythical place in the Roman imagination. It was an island that was adrift in the ocean. Most Romans at this point in history weren't used to dealing with tides, so the rise and fall of the ocean, as they would have seen it, must have been terrifying. Of course, there were stories about warrior priests and powerful foreign gods. Scary stuff. So if Caesar led an exhibition and tamed the wild island, he would gain immense prestige and glory from his colleagues. Caesar's expeditions, both of them, didn't penetrate much further inland than Kent. Caesar kept a detailed description of his campaigns, and these survive to this day in a highly editorialized format. But what they do say is ever so interesting. He says that the part of Britain he visited was much like that of Gaul because of Gallic immigration. Most of the people lived in the countryside. They had a few fortified settlements, they were ruled by a warrior elite, and the Britons made particular use of war chariots. These weren't scythed like Eastern chariots, but they were used as rapid transportation for the warrior elite. They would roll up to battle on their chariots, fight for a bit, throw a few javelins, engage in melee combat, and then roll away on their chariot if things got a bit hairy. But Caesar also describes the bizarre practices of the inland Britons. Here's what Caesar says, translated into English. Most of those inhabiting the interior do not grow corn, but live instead on milk and meat and clothe themselves in skins. All the Britons dyed themselves with woad, which produces a blue colour, and as a result their appearance in battle is all the more daunting. They wear their hair long and shave all their bodies with the exception of their heads and upper lip. Wives are shared between groups of 10 or 12 men, especially between brothers and between fathers and sons. The offspring, on the other hand, are considered the children of the man with whom the woman first lived. Well, that's packed full of juicy claims. Perhaps Caesar did see a few of the inland Britons during his conquest, but I think it's more likely that he's basing his descriptions on tales and a general xenophobia. We know for a fact that inland Britons did grow corn, but they also reared cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, and of course, they drank the milk and ate the meat. Caesar was misinformed, or was deliberately misinforming his readers about that. The thing that tends to capture everyone's imagination is of course the wife sharing. There is no other evidence for this other than what Caesar claims. Personally, I don't think we can trust him. The ancient Britons didn't appear to have much of a problem with female monarchs or chiefs. Cartimandua of the Brigantes and Boudica of the Iceni are 2 notable examples from later history. Perhaps Caesar was over-extrapolating this tolerance for female rule as some wife-sharing hellscape. To a Roman there would be nothing worse because of the immense value they placed on inheritance and being sure who the true father was. Ironic that Caesar, a famous adulterer with other men's wives, would make up a story about the morally outrageous practice of wife-sharing. Some archaeologists have argued that Caesar's expeditions to Britain, far from being a failure, actually established various client kingdoms on the island. We certainly do see plenty of Roman-made stuff ending up in elite British contexts. Jars for storing wine and olives, bronze medical kits, jewellery, and even this outstanding medallion featuring the first Emperor Augustus. Maybe, but any kind of Roman rule was by proxy, if there was any major influence. After a major disaster at the Teutoburg forest, where thousands of Roman soldiers were slaughtered by Germanic war bands, the Emperor Augustus appeared to have a rethink of imperial strategy. The days of endless conquests were over. It was time to entrench. Britain, therefore, was to be taken off the cards as a province. Strabo was a Greek geographer and writing at the time. He was very much on board with the Roman Empire. He may have even had Roman citizenship. He argued that the cost of garrisoning Britain would have outweighed the revenue brought in by charging import and export duties, tariffs. We don't have economic data to say whether he was right or wrong, but I believe Strabo here was towing the party line of Augustus. Britain was a horrible place, not even worth conquering. Here's one particularly damning passage translated into English.
The men of Britain are taller than the Celts, not so blond, and of looser build. As an indication of their size, I saw myself some in Rome, little more than boys, standing as much as half a foot above the tallest in the city, though they were bow-legged, and in other respects lacking any gracefulness of body. Their customs are in some respects like those of the Celts, in other respects simpler and more barbaric. As a result, some of them, through their want of skill, do not make cheese, though they have no shortage of milk. They are also unskilled in horticulture or farming in general. They are ruled by chieftains. In war they mostly use the chariot like some of the Celts. The forests are their cities, for they fortify a large circular enclosure with felled trees, and there they make themselves huts and pen their cattle, though not for a long stay. Their weather tends to rain rather than snow, and on days when there are no clouds, fog persists for a long time, with the result that throughout the whole day, the sun can be seen for only about 3 or 4 hours around noon.
Wow, who would even want to conquer Britain? This description reminds me of colonial explorers talking about lands and peoples in the New Worlds. They didn't really understand them, but they certainly thought they were superior to them. Some of what Strabo says is untrue. The ancient Britons were excellent farmers. The point about some Britons not being able to make cheese is something I've been researching for years, and that's not even an exaggeration. I've yet to find an example of an Iron Age cheese strainer, so maybe he was right, but you don't actually need a ceramic strainer to make cheese. That was just the preferred Roman method. Iron Age people could have used baskets or bags, things that don't survive well in the archaeological record. Some of Strabo's points can be worked to match existing archaeology. For example, when he says that the cities of the Britons are their forests, he's probably talking about hillforts. These seasonally occupied centres of power where the nobility and other key people fortified themselves with their cattle in these structures. Compared to Pontus, modern-day Turkey, where Strabo was from, Britain was cloudy. But compared to northern France, not so unique. I've spent a lot of time in this video talking about the negative attitude, shall we say, that some Romans had towards ancient Britons. However, I think I could also make another video about all the ways in which some Romans loved some ancient Britons. There was intermarrying, Britons fighting on behalf of the Roman Empire, people wearing necklaces with the Roman Emperor's face on them, and that's not to mention the Emperor Constantine's great soft spot for the province. History is a complex beast where people can hold simultaneous and contradictory views on identity and how they feel about other people. But thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Do let me know if you come across any Iron Age cheese strainers from Britain though. I'd be very curious about that.